no doubt, also, Dominic, a lot of focus where you are is on the slight change in rhetoric from some international leaders like President Biden.
I'm sure they're listening to that in places like what's happening in there. That's the Kuria, that's the Israeli government Ministry of Defense. So diplomats, commanders, planners will be listening to those words that we've heard from Joe Biden. We've heard from Emmanuel Macron, the strongest criticism yet of the bombardment. He said it was unjustifiable. And then that more tempered, more calibrated criticism, if you like, or certainly words of warning to Israel from Rishi Sunak. But what's happening outside that government compound here is focused entirely on the plight of the more than 200 hostages still being held in Gaza by Hamas and other groups. And what's happening here, Wilf, to give you an idea, is that the relatives of those hundreds of hostages are marching now from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. They plan to march here, and they've just set off and outside the Kuria, and they're on their way now to Jerusalem, and they hope to reach the offices of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Saturday. So it's going to be a long march. They're going to be camping along the way, and what they're hoping to do 5 weeks now into this conflict is to keep the minds of Israelis, but I think more importantly to them, of the world, focused on the plight of those hostages. There's a lot of concern amongst the hostage families I've been speaking to, people here, but also in other interviews, that events in Gaza are kind of eclipsing the focus and attention on their relatives. A lot of concern about that, and I think a lot of fear that the world is kind of moving on, in the words of one brother of two girls, two sisters who were taken along with their young girls on October the 7th. He said, he understands people being focused on people suffering in Gaza. He understands people being very concerned about the thousands of dead in Gaza, but also he wants to point out his family is also suffering in Gaza, still being held there, and he's very worried that the world is moving on from that and not focusing attention on their plight and the plight of hundreds. There's been an update in terms of hostage news today, with the sad news that an Israeli woman's body has been filmed by Hamas and then identified by the IDF, Noah Marciano, who was taken on October 7th, now confirmed dead. So that number of hostages reduced by one, but more than 200 left. If we can have a quick word with Danny Algarat here. Danny, quickly tell me, what are you hoping to achieve here? What's the plan?
Some answers from the Prime Minister. Let them be kidnapped.
Is the government doing enough, Danny?
I don't know if they're doing enough. We need to see the results. If we are not have results, so it's not enough.
Tell us a bit about your brother Itzhak. What happened to him? Have you heard from him since October the 7th?
He was taken up, they shot his hand and he was bleeding. And I hope that they give them medical care.
And how have you been? What's it been like living with the knowledge your brother's been taken hostage by Hamas?
How do you live if you know that your
brother
is in the Hamas hands? How do you feel?
Well, I'm asking Danny. I think that's all we'll get from Danny. It's fairly chaotic scenes here, Wilf, as the march moves out of Tel Aviv, heads across the Ayalon, the main highway through Tel Aviv, and then heads towards Jerusalem. They say it's going to be a 4-day march, and throughout those days they're hoping the world's focus and Israel's focus will remain firmly on the plight of hostages. They're concerned that attention is moving on from their plight because of what's happening in Gaza, particularly in the hospitals, the plight of the civilians who've died there, and their thousands, the thousands of others injured, and the concerns about the children whose lives are being lost because of fuel supplies being cut in Gaza. So they're aware of all of that going on, but they want to keep the world's attention focused, obviously, on what happened to their relatives.